Let's go to the Russia talks.
Sure.
Two things. One, was there any agreement on anything, even to have another round of talks that was agreed to in this?
So, Matt, as you know, these were discussions. They were preliminary discussions. And the idea was for the United States and, in our hope, the Russian Federation to come with viable, practical, reciprocal ideas, to put those on the table, and to see if there were the potential for progress. We did not intend this to be a forum where certainly decisions were reached, where any breakthroughs could be achieved or really even contemplated. This wasn't, as you heard from the deputy this morning, even what we would consider a negotiation.
Okay, that's not my question. I just want to know, I mean, because this is the third round of these that you've had. And in the previous rounds, there has been an agreement that you would, at some point, at some level, whether it's a working group or whatever, meet again. You're saying there wasn't even that?
What I'm saying is that it was not intended to reach a decision. This was not a decisive session.
What it was intended to do. Was there any agreement at all to meet again at any,
as you heard,
this level or any other level?
As you heard from the deputy, Matt, what's going to happen over the course of this week? Tomorrow, the deputy will travel to Brussels. She'll meet with our NATO, with our European allies. They, in turn, will then have multilateral discussions with the Russian Federation. And we expect there will be additional dialogue with the Russian Federation in the coming days regarding what the next iteration of this discussion will look like.
But the bottom line is that there was no agreement to have, not that you were expecting to have one, but there was no agreement to meet again at any other level in this bilateral format.
There was an agreement that we will talk again in the coming days to figure out what those next steps look like.
And then lastly, I asked Deputy Secretary Sherman this before in terms of what it is that the U.S. and its allies would regard as significant or enough de-escalation from the Russian side as it relates specifically to Ukraine. She suggested that meant returning Russian troops that are now deployed on the border to their barracks. But those barracks can be anywhere in Russia. They could be 10 miles from where they are now. And so I want to bring this up again. Understanding the context and the history of what Russian troop deployments might mean to countries along its border, these are still troop movements within their own country. They haven't gone anywhere else, at least not yet.
So
these. So what is it that you guys are looking for in terms of de-escalation? Because if you're going to try to bar countries from moving troops around inside their own borders, I don't think no one's going to go for that.
Let me make a couple points on that, Matt. There is a reason we have been talking about this. The United States has put this on the agenda, really the center of our foreign policy agenda, and at the top of our messaging agenda in many ways for the past 2 months. That is because this buildup of nearly 100,000 Russian troops in recent weeks, we've called it unusual, we've called it massive, we have called it concerning. It is all of those things. That is why we are taking this with all due seriousness. You heard from the deputy that what we have consistently called for is for these Russian troops to return to their barracks. You seem to suggest that it is completely normal in the course of business for 100,000 troops to be on the border with Ukraine. That is not normal. That is why we've called it unusual. That's why we've been talking about this for the past 2 months.
But where do you want? What barracks do you want them to go to? Some barracks in Vladivostok? I mean, I don't understand it. I get the concern. I get the history, and I get the fears in Ukraine and elsewhere about what the potential, what the significance might be of these troops. But why is it for you to tell the Russians where exactly they can house their own troops? Where do you want? Go to barracks where? Back in Moscow? In Yekaterinburg? In where?
Matt, this buildup started with the unusual movements that has now culminated in nearly 100,000 troops. It took movement to get to this buildup. What we would like to see is for troops to return to their permanent staging grounds, their permanent bases. If they were to do that, there would not be nearly 100,000 troops on Ukraine's border. I'll make another point. The Russians did this without any transparency, without telling anyone. Now, of course, we are going to notice 100,000 troops, probably far less in terms of a buildup. Our allies are going to notice it. Commercial satellite companies are going to notice it. So it's not that the Russians sought to do this furtively or stealthily. Of course, everyone is going to notice a massive buildup on the order of 100,000 troops. And that's really the point. The Russians knew that we would notice this. The Russians knew that the intimidating signals that they are very clearly intending to send to Kyiv will be noticed not only in Kyiv, but in Washington and in Brussels and in Paris and London and Berlin and elsewhere. And that's certainly the case. You raise the history, but the history here is also important. This is not a country where there is...
That's why I raised
No, and I'm glad you did. This is
how far away from Ukraine's borders do you want these troops to go?
Matt, what we have called for is a return to their barracks. And if we see a return to their barracks, that is an indication of de-escalation. If these are truly exercises, and I think you can understand our skepticism as to why that might be the case, we would like transparency. We would like to hear from the Russians what exactly it is they're exercising, why they're exercising on this scale, and when they intend to return to their permanent staging grounds. But just to finish the point I was making before, and the point you helpfully raised, is that this is a country that has a track record here. And we would be remiss not to point out that track record. As we speak today, there are Russian forces and Russian-backed forces on sovereign Ukrainian territory. As we speak today, Russia, as we've just discussed, has amassed tens of thousands, almost 100,000 troops on Ukraine's borders, and they've done so in a relatively short period of time. It was, of course, Russia that in 2014 sought to annex Crimea, instigated a war in eastern Ukraine, continues to fuel conflict there. It is Russia that over the years has invaded, has occupied, has fomented conflict against its neighbors and others. The list is long. I probably don't have time to go through all of them, but Ukraine, Georgia, Moldova, just to name a few. It is Russia that over the years has interfered in democratic elections, including our own, but of course not limited to our own. They have used extraterritorially chemical weapons. They have orchestrated cyber attacks. They've used energy as a weapon, among other tactics. So again, you'll have to pardon and probably understand our skepticism when we hear from the Russians that these are just exercises, that, as we heard from them today, that we shouldn't be concerned. We hear that. What we want to see are signs of de-escalation. And certainly a sign of de-escalation would be for these troops to return to their permanent bases.